What's going on, everybody? Your boys Ramdeen and Black here at the stunning La Tohu in Montreal as we are getting set for TKO40, a sensational night of mixed martial arts ahead. Some cool stuff happening always in La Belle Province, this amazing city of Montreal, and we got to witness it yesterday. You hooked up two of the greats in the world of combat sports in mixed martial arts. A man vying for the interim 155-pound championship coming up next month, October. Kevin Lee was invited to the Montreal Wrestling Club to wrestle, well, to wrestle all the people there, train, and work with one George St. Pierre, who's getting ready to make his return back to mixed martial arts and the UFC, moving up to 185 pounds to challenge Michael Bisping. What a cool thing that was yesterday.
That was super cool. So Keith, tonight, if you are watching this live, thank you. Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, TKO40 in Canada on Fight Network and everywhere worldwide on FightPass. 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live on FightPass. TKO, best fights in the world.
Oh, man.
And Kevin Lee's little brother, Keith Lee, who's a stud, 20 years old, is fighting tonight. So Kevin's in town cornering him. If you hear loud music, they're going to sound check. That's the way it is. You see guys, we'll show you the cage. There will be guys in the cage. They're gonna, this is what happens before the show. Yes, so I texted George. I knew he was training. He said, sure, invite Kevin. I got a hold of David Zilberman. Yeah. Who, the Zilbermans.
One of the directors, I think, the board of directors.
So we made sure it was cool for Kevin to come, brought Kevin down. Him and George got along famously. They did some work together. And Keith trained with his coach.
Yeah, Robert Follis. Got a chance to hang it with him, and you know he's been around the game for such a long time. Originally from Oregon, had the chance to train with Randy Couture and Matt Lindland and Dan Henderson and Chael Sonnen and Chris Lieben and blah blah blah. And then now one of the head coaches at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas, and this is the first time that he is in the corner of Keith Lee, and he said the improvements he's made over the last number of months are shocking, and they'll be on full display tonight.
And Kevin too. Kevin's training with Robert Follis and that team there. They made Misha, helped Misha Tate become a champion. Robert's a genius, man. That's one of the great things for us. It's cool. We get to go and train with, so we trained over at Sherbatov MMA, and I trained at TriStar with Dean Barry, a world karate champion. So we learned a lot on this trip, and definitely get TKO40. You want to see Keith and a ton of great fights tonight on FightPass.
And what about the interim title fight between Kevin Lee and El Kukui, Tony Ferguson? A super cool matchup, especially when you see Kevin Lee just turned 25 a few days ago, really in his athletic prime. He has no fear, all the confidence in the world, a killer record, 16-2. You know he learned from the losses to Leo Santos and Ali Aquinta. He's been doing nothing but fighting top-level competition, and you saw what he's capable of in that fight with Michael Chiesa. Whether or not you agree with the stoppage, for him to be paired with all of this incredible talent, and he's faced a long guy like El Kukui in his matchup with Michael Chiesa. So, how do you think that'll serve him?
Yeah, it's gonna. I mean, this is the two best guys that are out there in the world right now. It's the perfect spot, and they're young like crazy. Yeah. You know, when you think of Tony, you think of improvisation, rule breaking, and I don't mean rules like eye pokes and groin shots and whatever.
However, we talked about that yesterday.
For sure. These guys will be in a fight. It'll be in a fight. There happens to be a ref, but this isn't a sporting contest. They're both going to make this a fight, and that's going to be really interesting. But you think of Tony sort of breaking the fundamentals or reinventing fundamentals, changing, you know, what you should and shouldn't do in a fight, and it makes him incredibly dangerous. He thinks his own way. He trains his own way. Check out the sound check. So then Kevin, you think of him as kind of a fundamentals-based fighter. He's got a tight boxing game. He grew up wrestling. But then when you talked to Follis last night, Follis looks at the game and says, anytime somebody says you cannot do something, don't cross your feet when you do an arm bar, don't ever move this way, don't ever go straight backwards, whatever these rules are, to him, and his exact words were, that's where the gold is. So they're creative guys too. So at this level, these two young guys are changing fighting. Guys at this level are changing fighting. It's very hard to predict what you'll see, and that is why it's the golden age of martial arts right now.
It really is, and you think of Kevin Lee's potential, and I think that's one of the things that is most remarkable and amazing about not only this athlete but this fight is, when does he come into his complete own, where he's taken all the knowledge that he's learned from everybody and he's able to execute it in real time the best he's ever been able to.
Yeah, it's going to be scary what these guys can become. I mean, Keith is 20.
Yeah.
Kevin's only 25. You know what I mean? Well, his understanding of what fighting is will change 8 more times in his life.
Yeah.
And this is how good he is right now. So that is pretty incredible. Tony, the biggest thing is you don't know what's coming. You can't know what's coming because at times Tony doesn't know what's coming. He's very unhinged and free and allows himself to go in and express stuff. You know, when we talk about fights sometimes, and you know, somebody was saying to me, well, what about Demetrius Johnson's fights with Uncle Creepy? Isn't there something that Borg can learn? Of course, that fight is off for tomorrow, but isn't there something Borg can learn in that? I'm like, that's like saying I have footage of traffic and how traffic moves in the city of Toronto from 6 years ago, so therefore I know how traffic moves. You know, they change so dramatically. And Tony is an unpredictable fighter. He's unpredictable to you. He's unpredictable to us. He's unpredictable to Kevin. And he's unpredictable to Tony Ferguson. That's very hard to deal with. So Kevin, as much as he and Follis and Dewey and their killer team will go in and play different games with space and stuff, they also have to bring it back to some fundamentals to beat somebody like Tony. So it's that balance for Kevin Lee. The balance between being innovative and being sound.
And again, when I think about this fight, I think about creativity, because both guys are so skilled. Both guys have been around the block. They've seen everything. They have the highest level of training. Now it's, can I trick the other guy? Can I get him to bite? And can I capitalize if he does bite? And can you trick somebody of that caliber?
Yeah, that's the thing. So, you know, on Wednesday I got to train at TriStar, and on Thursday we were training over at Sherbatov MMA. And I watched Yanni Sherbatov, who's a 125-pounder. You knew him from the Ultimate Fighter, the flyweight champions Ultimate Fighter. I saw him kick you in the head.
Oh yeah, man, oh man.
I don't know if you can see, there's like a little red scrape up here. Ramdeen's a heavyweight.
Yeah.
But why? Why could he do that? Obviously, levels, but you couldn't figure out what he did, right? Like, you can't figure out what he's doing. The trick for people of this level, and you're seeing it at the highest level, is letting you, so Ramdeen and I fighting, letting him believe he figured something out. So I have a complex pattern that he can't read, but I purposefully let him think he's read that. Oh, my footwork is that rhythm. Okay, oh, Ramdeen has now read it. And then bang, he was wrong. I made him believe that. And that dynamic is what's going on non-stop in a Tony Ferguson versus a Kevin Lee. What we do see, what we will see, and what we'll be able to discuss after, look, he moved his head, and this thing happened, and the knee came up, and that is very cool. But how and why is only in their minds, and they may not be able to explain it. That's why it's so amazing. Our knowledge of what we require to explain fighting with fighters like this 2 years from now and 5 years from now, we don't have it yet. It must be acquired just the same way these guys do it. That's why this is such an exciting period, because it doesn't matter what anyone tells you. We don't know what Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson will look like. We don't.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The one intangible I have to ask is, because everybody kind of knows what this fight is. It is a title eliminator for the biggest fight in the history of your person. If you're Tony Ferguson or if you're Kevin Lee, the idea is you win this fight. Sure, you're going to win a UFC championship, but maybe the bigger prize is you get a chance to fight Conor McGregor and the money that comes with possibly the most famous fighter to ever compete in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this fight, you will... I don't know how old Tony is. He's into the 30 range. But he's still a young, talented guy with like a lot of nuts, you know, like a lot of, he loves fighting, he loves what he does, he's got a lot of pride. That guy will be a UFC champion. Or Kevin Lee, a 25-year-old, will be a UFC champion. They will have a UFC belt, and for the rest of their life, they and their family will say, we did that. That is amazing. However, we know that the next level is the Conor McGregor life-changing money forever. Buy your mom a house, and buy your friend a house, and marry a supermodel, and travel the world, and buy a cottage and a yacht, and that's different shit.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
So this is a huge victory for whichever of these guys does it, but the next level is life-changing forever.
Yep. And will the fight with George St. Pierre and Michael Bisping, will that be life-changing money when you think of you know, the only person that I can think that does a better job of selling a fight in the UFC than Conor McGregor is Michael Bisping.
Yeah.
He just talks so much shit. He always brings it. You know what you're going to get from Michael Bisping. It's just his intensity. I know he's reeled all that back, but the idea of George St. Pierre becoming the 170-pound champion and then winning the 185-pound champion. I know there's an argument of who's the greatest of all time. He's certainly in that conversation, but will this bump him up a couple more notches if he happens to beat Michael Bisping, considering the level of competition Michael Bisping has faced his entire career?
Yes. Yes. Imagine that. I don't know now, and this is not inside. I've spent more time with George than anybody's going to spend with him, around him throughout this fight. I've spent days and days and days with him, watching him work and train and study and have fun and whatever. And so this isn't inside information. My feeling is that he may only fight this fight, or maybe another, or maybe 4. But the feeling you get is if you go in there and you have it, you revisit it, you experience it again, you hold that belt up again. There's no, that could be it. Really, what more the fuck would you need to do than that? But the thing,
in my opinion, he's already done enough.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't need to get back.
And that's a really good point. So Bisping is one of the wealthier guys. People don't know that. But you look back at the earnings in 2013, 14, 15, or 12, 13, 14, 15, he made more money than any of these guys. And that will surprise many people. And some people are like, you guys are full of shit. Go look it up. Bisping made more money in some of those calendar years than any other fighter. So Mike doesn't need the money, and George doesn't need the money. They're both champions. What the fuck are they doing this for? For the love of competition.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
Each guy, that's one of the things I love about this fight is, although Bisping will talk as much smack as he's going to talk, George will respond the way that he responds. Both guys, in their minds, understand the level of competition that will be standing across the cage from them.
Yeah, that's the thing. Not everybody understands how badass Michael Bisping is, which is a crime, although I don't think Mike gives a shit.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think he does. But George understands. George understands how good Michael Bisping is. He understands what the things about him that make him special. Sound check. The things about Bisping that make him special. And among that is, he's not going away. You're not going to discourage Michael Bisping. You're not going to make him pessimistic with bad moments. You're not going to make him, you know, negative or scared or worried. You're not going to make him tired. And George makes everybody tired. It's going to be different with Mike. George understands that this is a very unique challenge. Bisping's he has a aerobic and anaerobic capacity that is best in the game. Unmatched. Yeah. That's right. It's unmatched. For the nature of the endeavor of fighting. It's 5 minutes, it's aerobic and anaerobic, it has a 1 minute break. His anaerobic threshold, everything that he has, he's the best in. He's like a middle distance runner, and that's exactly, I don't know if something's happening. I don't know if this is recording. Something happened. I don't know if you guys saw a blip or not, but if not, I didn't lose my train of thought. Mike's a badass. That's where we were.
How do you, when you picture this fight, do you picture the fight being similar to George's other fights, or do you expect a completely reinvented George St. Pierre? I know he's talked to us about, you know, adding more karate and adding more traditional elements to his fighting style. Do you expect the look to be any different?
It's interesting. He's bigger and stronger. So George, as a wrestler, we saw him in the wrestling room last night. The grind he puts in as a wrestler, it's unreal. It's just unbelievable. And he trains with bigger and smaller for many different purposes. James Mancini is fighting tonight. TKO40 live on FightPass, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. He'll be fighting. I've seen him train with him. He's a 125er. I saw him train with Kevin Lee last night, 155er. Both are killer athletes. They look great together, and they're trained with the elite of the elite and giants. So he's accustomed to that. But he physically can handle Mike the way that he is used to fighting, but he's also added other elements to the game. But the game has changed dramatically, so just George being the best George is not going to win. Mike will beat the old George. Mike will beat the George that won in Toronto when he fought Jake Shields. The George who beat Jake Shields, Michael Bisping will beat that man. So George must have improved, which he has. George has added a lot of elements to his game. I get into now very weird territory I've never been in before. I've seen some of the game things that George has added as a guest and as a training partner and a friend, and I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about. You know know what I mean? One thing I can tell you is I was on the bottom of where George was beating me up from guard, and that's a terrifying experience. You feel George to master that position and blade his hip back, and you're like, this is the part where my head would be caved in. I also played karate with George and Dean Barry, a world karate champion that he's brought in, who will be fighting next weekend, his MMA debut next weekend. And Dean and others, the old sensei that used to fight in TKO, his nickname was the sensei.
Stefan
Dubé. And a number of other karate guys. So he's changed the way he expresses his striking game. Some elements of it, Eamon Zabi asked me very specifically, please don't talk about this particular element, has improved dramatically. But then Mike's a fucking badass. Mike's good at everything, impossible to discourage, in unbelievable shape, complex, much more complex boxing and striking and fist fighting than people believe, and he'll be in your face the whole time. Anderson Silva knocked him out cold, and then he won the next round. You know what I mean? Mike's the fucking best.
And that's why I know a lot of people, when you think of 2017 and you think about some of the big fights, the return of John Jones and Cormier and how that played out, and this, of course, the huge fight between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather Jr. I have a feeling, and I've said this before, that the fight between GSP and Michael Bisping will be the fight that people remember, because they're so crafty, they've been in there for so long, they're so super intelligent, and they understand how to evolve and how to reinvent themselves. I can't fucking wait.
It's gonna be amazing. I think Jorge is fighting Stephen Thompson on that card too. Hey Jorge, want to go do brunch again right after? Somebody pass that message on to my man Jorge.
We also got to talk about Saturday night. The UFC returns to Canada. Of course, it was supposed to be the 125-pound championship. The pound-for-pound best fighter on the planet, Demetrius Johnson, taking on Ray Borg. Borg got sick. He had to pull out. Now the new main event, the rematch between the current champion Amanda Nunes and Valentina the Bullet Shevchenko. Will there be anything different than the first fight?
If you're Amanda Nunes, you hope so, or else you're going to lose rounds 3, 4, and 5.
So you expect, if you look at that first fight, she got tired. Shevchenko came on. Luckily for Amanda Nunes, she happened to win rounds 1 and 2 and fade. So the idea is make sure we can maintain what we did in rounds 1 and 2 through 3, 4, and 5. Do
you remember when Vitor like destroys everybody in the first round or loses like for quite a long time? Then there were moments where it's like, well, let's change Vitor. Let's make him a little more patient. Then you have this old dog new trick scenario that's very hard to do. People don't always understand exactly what you just said, that it's not a universally recognized idea, that you actually control how much work you put in, how much energy you expend. You have much control over it, but so does your opponent. So if you're Amanda Nunes, I'm asking you, if you're Amanda Nunes, do you go out and say, let's manage our energy use a little more, let's start a little slower? Or do you go and say, fuck it, let's get this thing done in 10 minutes? Because sometimes you have a choice, other times your opponent forces the situation, and other times you just default back to your primary setting.
But she's smart enough, and her team is smart enough to understand that Shevchenko is a combat sport lifer. She has been in this game before there was any money to be made, so the idea is you can't play that game with her. Because if you come out hard and fast and strong, and what happens if she survives that?
It feels like it's Shevchenko's time, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, you see where she's at. You see her lifetime of fighting. She's settled in. She's getting submissions. You know, she's settled into the big picture of the game. It feels like it. Doesn't mean anything. Amanda Nunes can lay you out with a hard cross.
And that's it.
You know, but this is the highest level fight I think we can make it between two women.
No, you've talked to Shevchenko, and one thing I find interesting, because you said you asked her, is there anything that you admire? And it's almost like she took offense to the fact that, you know, there's nothing I admire.
Is there anything you admire about your opponent's martial arts game?
Yeah, and it's funny because we've been around lots of martial arts coaches and fighters, and the idea is to take a little bit from everybody that you work with. You have to admire because you don't know anything. It's impossible to have every piece of knowledge when it comes to martial arts.
But she's very much a martial artist. She also talked to me about how martial arts influenced her life, her learning, how she interacts with the world. That's what a real martial arts is. Oh, are we still live? If that was interrupted, we are going to bail pretty soon because we have to get ready for the fight. But Shevchenko is very, very much a martial artist, and you study martial arts long enough, and it becomes part of your identity, the way you interface with the world around you. And that's who she is. That's who Amanda Nunes is as well. This is the highest level fight you can make in the world, and so is Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, so is George St. Pierre and Michael Bisping, and so is fucking TKO40 live on Fight Pass, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today.
It is going to be a hell of a night of mixed martial arts. As a matter of fact, a hell of a weekend of mixed martial arts here in Canada. TKO40 going down very soon.
Enjoy the hostilities, my friends.